Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game, with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, good evening. I know you're not in Liverpool just at the moment. You're in somewhere even more exotic, aren't you?
Yes, I'm at St George's Park, which is the FA's sort of HQ. It's where the England team and the Lionesses come to train. So I'm doing some work here for the League Managers Association. And I'm staying in one of the rooms. I think, God blimey, Jack Grealish might have cleaned his teeth in this room for all I know, and it's quite overwhelming for a dweeb like me.
Yeah, let's not ponder on what Jack Grealish may have done in that room, Kieran. To be honest, talking of footballers, I did a podcast with Les Strong yesterday, ex Fulham legend, who it turns out is one of the most funny, entertaining and interesting people I've ever met, albeit online. So if we can find an excuse to get Les Strong on a Football Finance pod, we will definitely go. Man alive, he had some top-class Rodney Marsh stories. Anyway, enough of that. The 70s chit-chat. It's Newsday, Kieran. And the first news story is literally only about 90 minutes old. We are recording this on a Tuesday, for various administrative reasons, but Coventry fans bundled out of the FA Cup by a National League side, albeit in a very exciting game, have had all sorts of uncertainties in the past 2 years, but some news today that might begin to give them a little bit of optimism.
Yes, I think this is a positive step. It's been confirmed that Doug King, who's sort of a local businessman, who's also a Cov fan, he's acquired the company Otium Entertainment, which effectively runs Coventry City, from the hedge fund Sisu. I think Sisu have got something like 15 to 20% of still remaining. But I think he understands football, so it's one thing which is out of the way. The other thing which is outstanding, and it's something that we've mentioned on many occasions, is the stadium. Yeah. The stadium went into administration, as people may recall, due to the problems of Wasps Rugby Club. And it was bought by Mike Ashley. Mike Ashley effectively had a period of exclusivity to negotiate for the stadium. And I think the understanding is that Mike Ashley paid £18 million for it. Doug King was saying, well, I'm prepared to pay $25 million, but if you've got a period of exclusivity and you've agreed a price, Mike Ashley was able to bring that deal to its conclusion. But there's nothing to stop Mike Ashley now turning around to Doug King and say, well, I'll cheerfully take £25 million off you. And then you've got the football club and the football ground together, and there's not an ongoing issue in terms of rent or what's going to happen. Is it going to be a 1-year deal, a 3-year deal? All that we know at present is that Coventry have the rights to use the stadium for the rest of the year. I think for the club going forwards, it would make sense. So it could be that the two parties could come together. Mike Ashley makes a bit of profit out of it. He's a happy bunny. Doug King gets the ground and the football club. He's happy with that as well, and then Coventry can go forwards. But I think it's for Coventry City fans last season or last calendar year probably thought that they'd stepped on a succession of black cats. There was nothing but bad news after bad news coming through. It's great news. I like Cov. It's always been a good away ground, both Highfield Road and Rico or whatever it's called these days.
I used to get very confused by the black cat situation because half my Irish family thought they were lucky and the other half thought they were unlucky. So there was a lot of crossing themselves, and whenever time we saw a black cat. Do we know much about Doug King, Kieran? I know it's a very un-English and indiscreet question to ask, but would he be able to afford the stadium as well? Do we know if he has any sort of relationship with Mike Ashley? Because it seems that the only thing we really know about him is that he's a Coventry City fan, which I imagine is of a great relief to the other fans.
He's been independently successful in terms of his own businesses. He certainly would be in a position to put in a bid for the stadium. So it's I think it's a relief. It's great that he's a fan as well, but being a fan with resources certainly helps.
Yeah, I mean it's a big leap, isn't it, from a hedge fund to a fan? But it's a good one, isn't it? But we've discussed this before, Kieran. What would Mike Ashley benefit by not cooperating and allowing Coventry to continue playing at the ground?
I think Mike Ashley, he had a bad experience at Derby, and we both know things that we can say and we can't say, but he was certainly keen to buy the club and the stadium. And it looks as if somebody or some people were not keen on Mike Ashley getting involved. And whilst he could have bought the football club from the administrators, I think the stadium was proving to be a bit more of a bugbear. So having been through that chastening experience, I think he sort of said, well, okay, well, let's see what I can do if the tables are turned. Mike Ashley is a very smart person when it comes to identifying value in businesses. He's got a negative side as well, and I think that's been well documented. But if he can make a £6 or £7 million profit from owning a piece of property for a couple of months, then he might walk away and say, well, I've got guaranteed money coming in. I don't know what's going to happen on a longer term basis in terms of the stadium. One would assume that Coventry will want to play there, and he walks away with a smile on his face, having had a bad experience not too far away in the Midlands.
I imagine, Kieran, that the royal family this week have had several unscheduled emergency meetings with only one item on the agenda. And English football's equivalent have had a meeting this week with one very big item on the agenda.
Yes, this is, I think, a coming together in terms of the three bodies who are in charge of the game: the Football Association. As I'm speaking from their premises at present, I'm doffing my cap. The Premier League and the EFL, with a view to trying to knock heads together in terms of how both the national game and the domestic game are going to go forwards. So there are some thorny topics. First of all, the Premier League itself, and I don't think the other two institutions are overly bothered, but are we going to carry forwards with a 20-team Premier League? The big six clubs, which could become a big seven over the course of the next few years, if Newcastle's owners are able to continue to fund it and to expand Newcastle United, they want a slimmer Premier League. Ideally, they'd want 16 teams in it. I think they'd probably compromise on 18, and that was certainly some of the things that were in both Project Big Picture and Super League. So the other 14 clubs, or 13 or 14, will resist. And let's have a bit of self-interest here. As a Brighton fan or as a Palace fan, would you rather have 19 or 17 or 15 home matches? Well, we'd rather have 19 because it forms a big part of our season. The other clubs want more opportunities to play sort of exhibition games, an expanded European competition, and so on, and that would come at the cost of a smaller Premier League and a less competitive Premier League as well. So that's one issue. Then we have the two cup competitions. I thought the third round of the FA Cup this year was was one of the most memorable for a long, long time.
Did you?
And the FA Cup went through a period of
I
being
genuinely can't remember
disrespected.
what happened. It was only 3 days ago. I've got no memory whatsoever of this year's FA Cup third round.
Well, you mentioned Wrexham winning at
Yes,
Coventry.
yeah,
We
Sheffield
had
Wednesday.
Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah.
We had the Leeds match at Cardiff, which went into
Stevenage.
injury time and so on. Forest
Stevenage.
getting stuffed by Blackpool. So it was
Stevenage. I'll say it again, Kieran.
Stevenage at Villa were absolutely fantastic. So that was really exciting. And sort of 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of Premier League clubs were making 11 changes.
Yep.
And not taking the competition that seriously. And that is not as extreme as it used to be, which I think is great. So the excitement has come back from that. But we still have replays, and I think it's almost certain that replays are going to disappear from the third round onwards. Now, in respect of that, could there be a slight redistribution of money so that clubs from lower leagues get a greater share, because they are the biggest losers here? So I think that's what's going to happen. That will free up another midweek slot, which is what those clubs who are in the European competitions want. We've got the Community Shield. That we know that takes place the week before the season starts. Well, the noise is coming from some of the bigger clubs is, we don't really want to be there, A, because we're not making money, and B, we could be doing the exhibition matches and picking up a couple of million per match overseas. So it could be that the Community Shield will be shifted in terms of when that takes place. Could be shifted overseas. It could become an exhibition match. We don't know, but it's certainly one of those things which is up for grabs. And then sort of the big elephant in the room is the money. How is it going to be split? And the EFL are effectively saying, well, we want 25%, but we've got no negotiating power. And it's been pointed out that if you go back to 1992, the difference in income between the Premier League and the 72 clubs in the EFL was not significant. And I've got the numbers here. The Premier League has grown by 2,800% since then, and the clubs in the EFL have grown by about 550. So the Premier League has been very, very successful, and the clubs in the EFL have been modestly successful. And one of the biggest errors in the history of English football is when the Premier League initially said, we'll give you 25% of the deal, the EFL said, two fingers to you lot, we're going to go it alone because we think we can make more money. And it proved to be, in hindsight, a horrendous mistake. The EFL now say, well, yeah, okay, we've made a mistake. Can we just pretend that we'd said yes and have 25%? And the noises I'm hearing, the EFL aren't going anywhere near this. At present, 16% of Premier League money goes to clubs in the EFL, but the vast majority of that goes in the form of parachute payments. The EFL wants parachute payments abolished. The clubs in the bottom half of the Premier League aren't so keen on that. Some of the clubs who currently receive parachute payments who are in the Championship aren't keen on that as well, whereas you can perfectly understand, the likes of, Birmingham City and Millwall saying, well, we'd quite happily take some more money from the Premier League, and we're willing to be flexible in terms of how that money is spent, because the Premier League clubs are saying, well, the last time we gave you a bit of extra money, the first thing you did was you spaffed it on wages. So, where's the improvement in football? It's just gone straight into players' pockets. And, we'll be talking about Stoke City later, but, I know Steve Parish has said, why should I, as a Palace owner, give more money to the likes of Stoke City, who are richer than God.
Yeah.
And you can understand that his perspective. So there's a lot of self-interest. The other 14 teams also want the money, the extra money that's coming from the Premier League, to come from all of the TV money, including those clubs that currently get money from UEFA for Champions League and Europa League. And clearly the likes of Liverpool, Manchester United and Chelsea are going, well, we're not keen on that. So we've got divisions within divisions. So there's two sets of warring parties in the Premier League, the Super League 6 and the other 14. We've got two sets of warring parties in the EFL Championship, those who receive parachute payments and those who don't. And then we've got the clubs in Leagues 1 and 2 saying, well, if we're going to have better distribution of football, so a bit better distribution of money in football, it's worth pointing out that the clubs in the Championship get 80% of the EFL, the EFL TV deal, and we only get League 2, we get a tenth of it, and League 1 we get 12% compared to the Championship's 80%. So there's a lot of factions, there's a lot of disagreement, and I think it's fairly well known now from the briefings that we've had to the broadsheets at the very least, is that there will be a white paper coming out, possibly by the end of the month. The government doesn't want to get involved, and you can understand that, because whatever you do, I think the government won't be able to grow the cake. So therefore it comes to, how do you slice a cake? And it doesn't matter whether the Chancellor of the Exchequer or the independent football regulator. When you're slicing a cake, if you give somebody a bigger slice, somebody else gets a smaller one. And that person's going to moan, and they're going to weaponize their fans up against it. And then the other regulator's not working because it can't work for all 92 clubs simultaneously.
Can I ask, Kieran, do we know who initiated this meeting? And would it be fair to say that both the EFL and the Premier League would be perfectly happy if the FA weren't part of it? Because it almost seems as though they have nothing to say in these negotiations.
Yeah. I think the Football Association would like to be the independent regulator themselves, and they have pushed themselves forwards as a suggestion to the people involved in creating the white paper. I'm not sure that they've made a hugely positive impression. So yes, I think you're right that they are sidelined, with the exception of the FA Cup and the Community Shield. In terms of the matters that are being discussed, they are very much have a sideline, and their role is different. Their role is that of the national team for both the men and the women, and supporting grassroots football. So I think they are at the periphery of this, and whoever has managed to get all three parties together, then fair play to them. Yeah. But it's going to be. I presume it was an awkward meeting, and certainly. Rick Parry's written in the Times today, and I think his final sentence was, "Whoever is the independent regulator, good luck to you, because you're going to need it." And I think that's. I think that probably summarises the fact that not a lot of progress was made, and that there's still. It's not civil war, but it's not a meeting of minds.
Do you know? I think it would be interesting, Kieran, for both us and for our listeners, to get somebody on, preferably from the FA, to explain exactly what the FA's role in football is, because I think most football fans would be hazy on what the FA do, what they regulate, what power they have compared to the Premier League and the EFL. So that would be something that I think we should ask producer Guy to shuffle off his gold couch and maybe pick up his gold phone and make some sort of call. Ali and I and Ed over Christmas spent a lot of time watching spy films, Kieran, old spy films. It turned out that despite being married to Ali for many, many years, I had no idea that she was partial to a bit of Cloak and Dagger. And this next story, which involves PSG and Tottenham, seems to me to have Cloak and Dagger written all over it.
Yes, it does. And like all of these things, there's probably more to it and less to it than meets the eye, in the sense that the Qatari authorities, who are the present owners of Paris Saint-Germain, following the success of the World Cup as a tournament, are now saying, okay, we own PSG. Let's think, what's the most popular football competition domestically in the world? It's the Premier League. So could we have a slice of that? And there's been talks that they've been in discussions with Spurs with regards to a potential investment. And depending upon which journalist you read, either it's a minority stake, it's taking over Joe Lewis's ENIC investment, which is the biggest shareholding, so that will be a controlling interest. Joe Lewis is looking at succession planning. I think it's fair to say, and his shares have gone into a trust. What are the beneficiaries of the trust going to do with those? So Spurs would be very attractive from a QSI point of view because they're in London, and there's London carries an interest premium for very many overseas people and overseas investors. But at the same time, QSI is also being linked with chats with the Glazers, because we know that Manchester United is up for sale. And I think it's intriguing, but again, it could be speculation. Manchester United's share price, which sort of flatlined following the initial announcement by the Glazers, has started ticking up again. Now, is that people putting 2 and 2 together and getting 5 and trying to buy in before a big offer comes in, or is there something more to it? We genuinely don't know. Liverpool's owners, FSG. They are open to offers as well, though certainly the noises I'm hearing on Merseyside is that that's very much going to be a minority stake. They want to do similarly to what we've seen with Abu Dhabi and Manchester City by selling off perhaps 15 to 20% and retaining control of the club. But money talks. If somebody comes in with an offer which blows them out of the water, then they are duty bound to consider what's best. So we've got clearly we've got Sheikh Mansour with Manchester City. We've got PIF with Newcastle United. Could we have a Qatari involvement in the Premier League? Well, there's certainly talk. But then you say to yourself, well, hold on, these are 3 fairly senior teams to which we're discussing. And the chances are that they're going to be in the Champions League on a regular basis. And PSG are going, there's probably a 99.999% chance of PSG being in the Champions League on a regular basis, given the financial advantages they have in terms of French football. And UEFA say you cannot have 2 clubs playing against each other with the same owners, because clearly you want some form of competitive integrity. And we all know the stories of the matches between was it Germany? It was Germany versus Austria, wasn't it? Yeah. Was it called the I can't remember. There was certainly in a World Cup was a very convenient match where if you or I had played, we would look the best players on the match, and we'd have probably put the most effort in. It suited both parties with a 0-0 draw. Yeah. So you don't want that in European football, and therefore, I think there could be some concerns from UEFA. But we've got 2 clubs in European football with the initials R and B. They've managed to persuade UEFA that they are not subject to common ownership, and it's just a mere coincidence. So just because we've got Qatari investment, it could come from 2 separate parties, and if UEFA could be persuaded that those 2 parties are independent of one another, then that particular hurdle could be overcome.
I know, Kieran, that you don't like correcting me when I'm wrong, but it's the only way I can learn. apart from being tapped on the nose with a rolled up newspaper, like a cat being litter trained. But I understand, and you may recall from the last pod, that that's code for I haven't got a clue. But I believe that UEFA's threshold for what constitutes a significant ownership of another club is different from the Premier League. In the Premier League, you can't have more than 10% of another club. And I think in UEFA, it's 30%. Is that right?
That's my understanding too.
Right.
Yep. But I would imagine, but certainly if somebody came in and bought 10 or 15% of Liverpool, that would be a non-issue. I suspect from both parties, because the Premier League doesn't particularly care, because what the Premier League doesn't want is two Premier League clubs who have more than 10% ownership. And given that given that QSI would be owning Paris Saint-Germain, because if you think about the City Football Group, they own clubs in Spain and Belgium and so on, and the Premier League doesn't have an issue with that. So it would only be if an individual or organisation owned more than 2% of two clubs in the Premier League. So the Premier League wouldn't have an issue, and then we'd have to see what happens at the UEFA level.
But with all due respect to the European clubs that Man City own, there's a big gap in class between them and City and between PSG and Spurs, isn't there?
Yes, yeah. It means Manchester City are very much the mothership as far as the City Football Group are concerned. I think Paris Saint-Germain with Messi and Neymar and some of the other people on their roster are a pretty attractive proposition in their own right. And they're certainly in the top 10 most valuable clubs in the world, as are Manchester United and Liverpool, and possibly Spurs as well. I think Spurs they're certainly up there, especially given the expansion following the new stadium.
Now, Kieran, I don't think you have much in common with Barcelona president Juan Laporta, but sadly, he's made a prediction just in the last few days that you've been making for about a year.
Yes, and this is a prediction which I'm hoping that I am completely wrong on.
Yes, we all are.
He has just come out and said Super League, it's not dead, and it will be with us within 2 years. He seems far more bullish that the European court ruling will allow sufficient flexibility for an independent competition to take place. And he said that initially that competition will be effectively a continental one in the sense that the English clubs won't be involved. But notice I do say English clubs there, nothing to stop Rangers and Celtic. And he says after a couple of years, if it's proven to be successful, there will be so much pressure put on the English clubs to join that sort of the opposition which we had a couple of years ago to the Super League, which was a closed competition and so on, it is likely to evaporate because English clubs won't have the same advantages that they have at present because the Premier League is bigger than any other league in Europe, and the English clubs are also doing pretty well as far as European competitions are concerned. So he is saying these things. Now there's a touch of Mandy Rice Davies in this, and for those kids who are of a youthful disposition. Mandy Rice Davies was a lady who organised benefits for high-ranking people, including some politicians, and when questioned in court about some accusations about her private affairs, she said, "Well, he would say that, wouldn't he?" Yes, and I think that's going to be the same with Laporte.
Can I just stop you there, Kieran? When you say there are some kids who might not know that story, there are some 65-year-olds who may not be aware of that story. It was part of the Profumo case way back when a leading politician denied having slept with her, and she said, "Well, he would say that, wouldn't he?" But it's I was just reading a good book just two days ago, and it didn't occur to me in a million years that we'd be talking about it on a live podcast.
Indeed. So, Laporta is still keen on bigging up the Super League. He says that there are many clubs still interested in it, but they're afraid of going public. And he could be right, he could be wrong. We will wait and see. But there's likely to be a more concrete ruling from the Advocate General, I think, in the European Court in a couple of months. Let's be honest about this. The Super League will benefit a few clubs in Europe. 20 or 30 clubs could certainly be better off, and 300 or 400 clubs could be substantially worse off as a result of it. And depending upon which side of that divide you are, would tend to help form your opinion, especially on the continent, where the level of hostility towards Super League was substantially less than what we saw here in the UK.
It's amazing how word association works, because I know the Public Image song was the other way round, but I've now got I could be wrong, I could be right going round on a loop in my head. I don't know what this says about the Premier League, Kieran, but just as most clubs in that organisation are thinking twice about NFTs, the Premier League are planning to launch their own collection.
It does appear that they've been in discussion with the organisation called So Rare or Sorare. I think it's So Rare.
So rare.
I think it's So Rare is the number of people who have actually genuinely made a profit out of these things. The numbers that were being spoken about a year or 2 years ago were hundreds of millions of pounds. It now is £30 million is the amount. Now that's going to be split between 20 clubs. It's still 1.5 million each, or is it going to be based on the number of tokens relating to individual clubs? We don't know. I am cautious, stroke skeptical about the benefits of non-fungible tokens, because you're effectively paying money for a digital receipt. Now, if people want to collect them, I've said this all along. If people want to collect them in exactly the same way as you collect, Panini stickers and so on, fill your boots. Go and have some fun with it. But I've collected Paninis for many, many years. I've never thought, when I've got bored and I'm still seeking for 4 Paraguayan players from the 2006 competition or whatever it is, I never thought, that's an investment that my great grandchildren or my grandchildren are going to benefit from me having spent all that money. It's just a bit of fun at the time, and if it is marketed as that and it is not marketed as a potential investment, then there's fine. We are living in a digital age. It's the nudge, nudge, wink, wink. You could become very rich because you can trade these, and we are creating artificial scarcity in the market, because you'll have a platinum Lionel Messi card and a gold Lionel Messi card and a regular Lionel Messi card. How those are being allocated, we would like to think that it's done on a digital basis, or sorry, on a random basis. But I was reading about a very well-known international footballer who went to Qatar, and he bought a lottery ticket there, and he became the winner of this. 6 weeks after promoting the competition.
Yeah, amazing.
And that it was just an amazing coincidence, of course. But you do become a little bit jaundiced, because there are an awful lot of scams out there. There's an awful lot of get quick rich crypto bros out there who are bigging up the benefits of these, and the people who are marketing the non-fungible tokens are saying, oh, you get intangible benefits. For me, an intangible benefit tends to be the word intangible without any benefit. I've never felt an urgency to be in a poll to choose the colour of the corner flags for a football club, and I'm not sure I could be persuaded to pass money into somebody else's hands for that particular privilege.
Yeah, so those of you who are wondering who the Premier League footballer is who went to Qatar and won the lottery, it's not Gary Neville. He did come away with a lot of money, but it wasn't by winning a lottery. Kieran, a friend of mine, or a chap I know, does the voiceovers for a lot of TV charity ads. So if you're watching heartbreaking images of donkeys struggling to get off the ground, it will be his voice that you can hear over the top. I'm going to get him to do a special voiceover for you and our listeners, saying if you know the whereabouts of 4 Paraguayan players and the Panini card, please get in touch, because it could change a middle-aged man's life. Now, the next story, Kieran, I'm not sure of the time scale of this, because I struggle to grasp time anyway, the older I get, especially after Christmas when I measure it in Baileys. But the takeover of Leeds by the San Francisco 49ers seems to have been ticking along for quite some time, but it's hit a little glitch, apparently.
Yes. The 49ers apparently, and I've not seen the documents, and I'm sure many other people haven't seen the documents either. The 49ers currently own 44% of Leeds United, with Andrea Radrizzani owing the other 56%. And there is, by all accounts, an option for the 49ers to buy out Radrizzani in January 2024, so in 12 months' time. And that is assuming that the club is not relegated in the interim period, and they're doing okay, but not spectacularly well to date this season. Now, Mr. Radrizzani effectively acquired control of Leeds for around about £45 million, and he is a wealthy man in his own right, independently by sort of benchmarking against people like you and I and most people who probably listen to this show. In the world of Premier League owners, he's not, and therefore that limits the amount of wealth that he can put into the club, and the amount of investment. So he is looking for an exit route, and he's made some comments over the course of the last week or so to say that yes, there an exit route. Perhaps it would be better with somebody with bigger resources to come in. And then we start to see articles in the papers about a mysterious Middle East consortium. Now, if I had £1 for every time I've read articles about mysterious Middle East consortiums, I myself might be up there with Mr. Radrizzani in terms of wealth, but sadly I'm not. So this could be him perhaps trying to flush out potential competition for the 49ers. We don't know the nature of their option to purchase. What the covenants are, what the prices are there. It could be if somebody comes in with a bid 20% higher than their asking price, then he's entitled to take it, and so on. But it's amongst Leeds fans, it's provoked a reaction, as you would expect. They're a passionate bunch, Leeds fans. Some people put it in the basket labelled B and S, and some people think it's more realistic than this. But he certainly now appears to be saying, I've probably taken the club as far as I can go in terms of financial support. We know that Leeds could easily play in front of more than 50,000 fans a match. It's a big city club. It's got that one city vibe about it, and where's the money coming from to upgrade? Because for a club like Leeds that's probably getting match day income, probably in the teens of millions, it wants to compete against Manchester United. Manchester United makes 110 million from ticket sales. Spurs makes over 100 million. Arsenal, if they're in the Champions League, will make over 100 million, and so on. And if Leeds wants to compete on the pitch, then they need to be able to compete off the pitch, especially if we move to a new form of financial fair play, which is based on income and wages, or income, which leads to wages, as opposed to the rules that we have at present.
You would imagine, though, Kieran, that Leeds United would be a very attractive prospect to any buyer, because despite the fact they're only in their second season back in the Premier League, they are a huge global brand based on their massive success in the late 60s and early 70s. I mean, they've got millions of fans around the world, much more than I would say many other Premier League clubs outside the traditional top 5 or 6.
Yes, yeah, and I think if somebody can leverage on that, the biggest challenge for all of these clubs is converting eyeballs into hard cash. But we are moving to a streaming age, a digital age, where I think clubs see more and more opportunities there. So you're absolutely right. Under those circumstances, Leeds represents a very attractive proposition. He bought the club for, was it 45 million?
Yeah.
I think realistically he could sell it for 10 times that and walk away suitably wealthy.
Now, we've already ascertained, Kieran, it probably won't mean that much to them, but Stoke City posted a loss in the year to March 2022.
Yes, this is a bit of a funny one. What's happened here is that Bet365 have published their accounts, and Bet365 owns Stoke City. So if you delve into the weeds, which is what nerds like me do, they did separate out some of the numbers for Stoke City. So Stoke City's parachute payments have now terminated. So Stoke, on income of 22 million, managed to make a loss of 26, which is quite spectacular. For every £100 of income you're generating, you're losing 130, which is just a crazy set of situations. And that's actually an improvement on the previous year. But because we're to the 31st of March, it's not the full football season. So we don't know how much the wage bill is, but I suspect the wage bill has come down. Should fans be worried about this? Well, the simple answer is no, because Bet365 continue to be an incredibly successful organisation. I estimate that the total wages spent with Bet365 in that particular year is around about £62 billion. And to put that in context, it would take the Premier League 12 years to generate the same amount of money as one of the largest firms of bookmakers in the country are concerned.
So, Kieran, did you say 62 billion?
Billion, yes.
Billion? Holy mother.
Billion, yeah.
Good Christ.
And that's the amount of bets that are placed. Clearly, many of those bets win. If you talk to bookies normally have a margin of around about 5%. In terms of their success, so that's how I sort of dug out those numbers. And if we let's try to put that in context. In the pre-COVID years, that's the equivalent of 50% of the NHS budget.
Wow.
Yeah, that's indicative.
Yeah.
But people in this country like to gamble, and also, to be fair to Bet365, they're not just based in the UK. Because for many people, they don't actually use the NHS services during a year. I can think of periods of my life when I went years and years without using NHS. But at the same time, I put on perhaps half a dozen bets in a year, and clearly there's people that are more enthusiastic about gambling than somebody like myself. So the gambling industry is the biggest beneficiary of the success of the Premier League, combined with the rise of digitalisation and apps and smartphones and so on. So Stoke fans need worry not, because the Coates family is integral to Stoke as a city, and Peter Coates, who was ultimately behind Bet365, he was a very passionate Stoke fan himself. But I think this also is indicative of perhaps a divide. I mentioned the divide within the Championship earlier, because Millwall have also published their accounts. They lost around about 12 million. And I went on another podcast earlier this week and said, well, in my view, Millwall are one of the best run clubs in the Championship, and yet they're paying £120 in wages for every £100 that comes in. They're losing £1 million a month, and the owner John Berylson has said, I'm effectively willing to pay £1 million a month for a glorified car park pass at the new Den, because that's the extent of limit. And I think this is the reason why we've got a divide in the Championship, is that those clubs like Millwall, who genuinely would like to operate on more of a break-even basis, they're up against the parachute clubs, and they're up against Stoke. Stoke have said, we want parachutes, we want all forms of financial control abolished, because we want to spend as much money as we choose, and the amount of money which they could choose is clearly a lot. So here we have sort of the financial controls that exist within football, trying to make it a slightly more even playing field, but it does result in clubs losing money left, right, and centre.
I'm just going to point out that our listeners may have heard some whistling in the background there, Kieran, while you answered that question. I was going to pretend it was the cat, but the cat's asleep under my chair, and the only thing you'll hear from her is snoring. So it was actually Ed whistling, because he's on his way out to the pub with his mates. And that was his specific. He has 3 very specific whistles, and that was his cheery going to the pub whistle. Talking of publishing accounts, Kieran, there's a club not far from where I'm sitting who really couldn't afford to lose 26.3 million in a year, who've just published theirs.
Yes. So here we have AFC Wimbledon, and they lost 800 grand. Which is. It's still 800 grand. It's still money which has to be found every month. And the vast majority of that they managed to offset through some player sales. So that they actually had a reasonably good year.
Sorry, were these accounts pre-relegation?
These are pre-relegation. Right, so these are 21-22. Right. So they will receive less money. They get 8% of the TV money as opposed to 12%. I think we mentioned this earlier, from the EFL. Their income was up £3 million. Partly was due to tickets, but it was also good to see, I think, catering and conference income, which I believe includes live podcasts of a football finance nature, contributed £800,000, whereas the previous year was a COVID year, and they made absolutely nothing from that particular source. So it's good to see that we are actually included in AFC Wimbledon's accounts.
Well, to be fair, Kieran, some of us, naming no names, put a lot of money behind the bar that night, to be perfectly honest. This next story, Kieran, is a slightly odd one, considering that we spoke last week about the fact that West Ham were probably the richest club outside the top 6 in the Premier League. And yet, this is a particularly, to me, a negative story.
Yes, I think this is a much broader issue than West Ham itself. This is all to do with the naming rights for the London Stadium.
Yeah.
And LLDC, who are the landlords, have gone to Karen Brady and said, look, for £4 million, we will let you sell the naming rights for the stadium, right, and you can keep the money, you can keep any profit that you make. And Karen Brady's going, well, look, we've been here for a few seasons, and we honestly don't think it's worth £4 million. Mm-hmm. And there's a guy called Tim Crow, who's a bit of a guru, when it comes to, he's been involved in these things in the past, and he's saying, well, potentially West Ham have been in the stadium now for a few years, and if you don't strike where the iron's hot, because
right,
we associate the Etihad with a front of shirt
Right.
and a stadium naming rights. We've got Arsenal with the Emirates, but it's the Emirates Stadium and the front of shirt. Think about my club, Brighton. It's the Amex Stadium, and Amex Public do the front of shirt. So I think Karen Brady would like to be in a position where she can go to a potential sponsor and say, look, I can offer you front of shirt and stadium naming rights. And the sponsor turns around and says, well, we're not convinced that stadium naming rights is actually worth £4 million. So there's a reluctance from West Ham, and she said, well, it might be worth two, but perfectly frank, we're not sure whether it's worth anything at all because you've faffed around for so long. Certainly pointing the finger in the direction of LLDC. West Ham are currently paying around about £3.5 million in rent to the landlord, but the running costs of the stadium, which are being borne by taxpayers, are £17 million a year. So you can see why LLDC is trying to get some money back. And this is the much broader issue of if you do host an Olympics or if you do host a World Cup competition, you are quite often left holding the baby in terms of what do you do with that piece of real estate afterwards, because in all of the glossy brochures which are put together by the management consultants when they're pitching to the IOC or they're pitching to FIFA, they say, oh, yeah, there's a legacy. These stadiums will be used for decades going forwards and they'll make a lot of money for the country and it will help towards the overall health. And there was a report given in Parliament last week which said the health and the participation in sporting in sport is declining still, despite the supposed legacy that the Olympics was going to give. So it's a pretty downbeat story for all concerned. For LLDC as an organisation, for West Ham because they're not going to be able to sell these on at a profit in their view, and also for the taxpayer who ultimately, like all the best parties, there's a big hangover and there's a lot of clearing up to do, and that clearing up is going to go for a long period of time.
I have to say I'm surprised by this story, Kieran, because West Ham are a Premier League club. You spoke earlier about the attraction of London for investors. So I would have thought that £4 million wasn't that much to have, for example, the Weetabix London Stadium would seem to me to be a reasonable price to pay.
Well, what would having that make you buy more Weetabix?
Well, fair point.
That's the issue. And no disrespect to West Ham, their trophy cabinet isn't bulging. So it's when these organisations tend to cash in most is either if they are involved in the creation of the stadium, then they can say, we've done all this for the community, and they get a positive return on that, or if they're able to show their products alongside the trappings of success, which tend to be championships, cups, and so on, then you can see from the point of view of Emirates and Etihad why they're willing to continue that relationship. But for Weetabix and West Ham, are you getting Weetabix's marketing budget? They were saying, well, we're advertising on telly, we're doing this. And then of course it'll become the Weetabix Bowl, and people be sort of mocking them potentially.
I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, maybe if it was the Bailey's London Stadium, because then at least they know that I would buy a bottle every time West Ham are on. So, just to be clear, Kieran, your theory. So, if Steve Parish, for example, were to try and sell the naming rights to Selhurst Park, he'd have a difficult job. But if Palace were to move to a new ground, he'd have a much easier job to sell the naming rights to that.
Yes, because you will still refer to it as Selhurst, won't you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And if you've got people who are as focused on the bottom line as the Glazers and Fenway Sports Group saying, well, we're not going to rename Old Trafford and we're not going to rename Anfield.
Fair point.
Then, no disrespect to West Ham or Palace, they've got a harder sell.
Yeah, fair point. Our penultimate story, Kieran, sort of is about Newcastle United.
Yes, sort of. As you know, I'm a big fan of Companies House, and
Of course.
I keep tabs on probably 250 companies, um, which
You should get help, Kieran. Have you ever thought of delegating? Because if you've got an assistant, you could keep tabs on 700 companies, 800. Maybe,
well, yes,
maybe bug the Baroness if you, Bob. Put her down as your assistant on the tax return.
well, yeah, but I'd still end up doing all the work.
Oh,
Yeah,
fair play.
no, to be fair, I was actually contacted by somebody this week who's offered to be my researcher
Oh, yeah. Was
on
this
all of
was this
this,
from
and
not from Moscow by any chance? Was it?
I sincerely hope not. But if that involved them having to check out my internet history, I suspect I wouldn't want a researcher for their benefit as much as mine. But this is a company called JV1, which is connected with Amanda Staveley, who is one of the directors of Newcastle. But when you start to unravel Newcastle, we go into one of these sort of Matryoshka doll scenarios. Is that JV1 is linked to a company called Cantervale Holdings, which is linked to a company called PZ Nuco, which is linked to a company called NC UK Investments,
Right, okay.
all of which are connected sort of directly and indirectly to Newcastle United. So what happened last week was this company JV1. It issued £14 million worth of shares. Now, the structure of Newcastle as a football club is that PIF own 80%, Amanda Staveley owns 10%, and the Reuben brothers own 10%. This is mainly Amanda Staveley's company. So what people are saying and putting two and two together and say, well, if Amanda Staveley's organisation is putting in 10% for 14 million into its company, it must be doing that for a purpose. So therefore, does that mean the Reuben brothers could be putting in 14 million? And if that's 20%, then in total, does it mean 140 million pounds is going into Newcastle United? And of course, we're in January. Newcastle are having a fantastic season on the pitch. Is this the James Maddison Fund? Is this the could there be an arrangement now between Cristiano Ronaldo's new club that he could go on loan to Newcastle United when their season ends, and could he therefore end up playing a few matches? And I don't know when their season ends up, but so people are starting to speculate, or it could be that it's just simply a cash flow requirement at Newcastle because the club has spent a lot of money. Newcastle spent money in the January 22 window. It bought Big Dan Burn, Trippier, and other players as well. And we know that transfers these days are all in instalments. So it could be that money's actually there to provide for the next instalments in terms of players that Newcastle have previously signed. But it just shows that something as innocent as a lodging at Companies House. I'll stick it out on social media, and people will reach their own conclusions. And I'm not trying to do this to for mischief purposes. It's sort of what I do. But so it could mean good news for Newcastle in terms of boosting their overall spending power, or it could be a damp squib. We genuinely don't know.
Right. Our last story, Kieran, takes us to Preston and a cash injection from a familiar source.
Yes, this is the Hemmings family. We spoke that Trevor Hemmings, who was the majority owner in Preston, he was putting in to the club about £7 or £8 million a year. He was also quite a big benefactor, I think, in the horse racing industry as well. And then he sadly passed away. And then there was the what's going to happen next. And some people in the Preston fan base thought, this could be the end of things. But what we have seen at Preston is the family say, well, as far as we're concerned, we've been watching Preston with our dad for years on end, so we're Preston fans, and we are seeing around about £1 million going in on a regular basis. And I think, to be fair, most the vast majority of Preston fans appreciate that in exactly the same way that the vast majority of Millwall fans appreciate what John Berylson's doing, putting in 10 to 12 million a year, and then you've got the Bet365, the way it's supporting, the way that it's supporting Stoke City, and sort of tying into with our sort of our earlier discussions, as the EFL are saying, this is all great, but we want to move to a scenario in which our clubs don't need external funding or owner funding. We want that to come from the Premier League, and I think it goes back to this ongoing dispute between the Premier League and the EFL when Premier League clubs point out, well, if your owners are willing to put in money and they're putting in money in, why should it come from us? And there's no simple answer.
Now, Kieran, I'm pretty sure when producer Guy sent the script through this morning that this paragraph wasn't in it. But like some kind of Harry Potter Marauders map magic thing, it's just suddenly appeared. And it says that we are exploring new sponsorship opportunities at the moment. So if you would like to promote your product, your service, your course, or anything else to our tens of thousands of listeners, then provided it matches our values, we'd be very happy to have a conversation with you. And you can send an email to producer Guy at dapdip.co.uk. That's Guy at dapdip.co.uk. That's DAPDIP. And what Guy hasn't thought through, Kieran, is that inadvertently, after 2.5, 3 years, we finally got hold of his email address.
Yes.
So we're halfway to tracking him down. If that person who volunteered to do your research, maybe you could put him or her onto finding out where producer Guy lives. Good luck to them.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod, then please go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. And as I've just said, if you are perhaps interested in sponsoring us, we'd be very keen to talk to you, and send an email to producer Guy at guy@dapdip.co.uk. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thanks as always for the support for the show from all the different means, for getting in contact with us through email, through social media, putting us to right when we get things wrong. And of course, the people at Patreon as well. We're very, very grateful. Another way to support the show is to give us a review. Go onto that podcast app. It could be your Apple podcast or Spotify, whatever it is, and to give us a review. Give us what you think we're worth. By all accounts, it doesn't matter what the narrative is. It's the fact that we're getting reviews helps us in the charts. You could even say you would rather have the show presented by Clint Eastwood and Armando Iannucci. And it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference to us. Myself and Kevin, our egos can cope with that. And the reason why I said that is because I was discussing my favourite Clint Eastwood movies with friends the other day, and we just realised what a fine canon of work Clint Eastwood has, and I'm just a huge fan of Armando as well.
The only problem is I know Armando of old. I'd love to have met Clint Eastwood. He was my dad's hero. God rest him. Dad's coffin went into the church to the strays of the good, the bad, and the ugly. But if Clint Eastwood was to say to Armando, "Do you feel lucky, punk?" Armando would then take 10 minutes asking him to define lucky. But that would be a great combination. It really would be. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.